Understand the importance of the success of our city schools. It's not easy finding qualified facilitators who will volunteer their time and talents to a community in which they do not reside. I found out driving an hour and a half one way each meeting. Somehow, David Connolly was able to convince the professionals of Fanning and Howie to do just that. And I would like to recognize, excuse me if I don't get your name right, Steve Wilsinski and Dan Obringa. And there was another gentleman named Tim Hamilton. Thank you very much. On behalf of the school board, the superintendent, and treasurer, for all that you have done to make the facilities task force a reality. We really do appreciate it. Last but certainly not least, on behalf of the school board and school district, I would like to thank our consultant, David Connolly of Rockmill Financial, for your guidance throughout this past year, your facilitation of the financial task force, and the oversight of both task forces over the past 7 months. Your work at the school board has been invaluable in working through the ins and outs of school financing and the laws that apply. We look forward to working with you throughout the next year. In May of last year, our school board past president, Jill Carr, announced that at our board meeting that we would be asking all community members to volunteer to participate in 2 task forces in order to formulate recommendations on what they believe our community would support in financing and facilities improvement for our school district. On June 25th, the first organizational meeting was held outlining the roles of each task force, and community members were asked to take part in one or both of the task forces. After 7 months of anticipation, tonight we will hear from both facilities and financial task forces as they present their recommendation to the board. I have asked our consultant, David Connolly, to facilitate tonight's meeting, so without further ado, let's get started. And I would just like to recognize John Zanfordino and Bill Harrell. They just walked in the door. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here again. It was only 7 short months ago that we came together in this auditorium and I asked for volunteers. It's been well over 100 hours of combined effort from all the members of the task forces to get to this particular point. Let me personally thank each and every one of you for how much time you took and how serious you were about this process. For those of you that sat in these meetings, you know that it was not a cakewalk. There was a lot of information, and everyone really did a great job. So I'm happy to be here tonight to get everything underway. I do want to again thank the board for creating the opportunity for the members to participate and for being able to share this information with the community. I am live streaming the presentation tonight on the Bowling Green Financial Task Force Facebook page, so people can find BG Financial TF on Facebook. You'll be able to see the presentation. So tonight is the conclusion of a process that we started where we've asked groups of community members to learn as much as they could learn about the facility needs for the district, as well as the things that impact the financial structure of the transaction. Tonight, those groups will be, their elected representatives or their volunteers will be presenting to the board what they would like you to do, or at least to consider as you move forward. We're going to handle this in a way where once each group finishes, we'll have the board and administration ask questions of the task force members that are making the presentation tonight, or from the professionals from Fanning Howie or Rockville to provide additional information if you need it this evening. And so what I would like to do is sort of move things along. We'll go ahead and invite the presenters from the Facilities Task Force up on stage and have them come up and move through the presentation, and then I'll come up after they finish to facilitate any questions that come along. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to begin thanking the board and Dr. Scrooge actually for allowing the community to be part of this. And at least for myself, great education about our facilities and our school system. I really appreciate being able to be a part of this. So let's begin with the facilities task force and what we did. I'd like to draw your attention to the sign here in our own high school, which says well, it used to say, I'm not telling you it's going to be easy, I'm telling you it's going to be worth it. That was kind of our running theme as we tried to get the community together and get a consensus on what our facilities needed to better educate our students. And even though we've been thanked already, I just want to throw out one more to Dan, Steve, and Tim, because these gentlemen have the patience of saints through some of these meetings and discussions with our community members as we try to come to some agreement. To better describe this process, I think we should just go through meeting by meeting and start with meeting one. October 11th, this was in the high school cafeteria. I remember the joke at the time, since it's about 90 degrees in there, that was not scheduled on purpose, but it's just a lucky coincidence to give us a quick overview of the experience we were going to have as we discussed our facilities. But this was our background information meeting. We learned a lot about the enrollment in our district, some previous OFCC recommendations that were made prior to the first levies, things about our building capacities, and our assessment overviews, the sort of information about when you renovate versus when you build new. And then we began our first group discussion. Group discussion was one of the big tools we had for this. We break up into small groups, and we were trying to do different groups every time so that everyone can communicate with each other and have an opportunity to meet each other and also hear the various opinions from the diverse members of the community. In that first group discussion, we made a list of the top 3 facilities needs and the top 3 issues that affect addressing these facilities needs. Excuse me, I'm not good with microphones. Moving on to the second meeting. First, we started off in the high school cafeteria again and went over the facility needs responses from the October 11th meeting. Then we had a dot exercise, not an acronym, little dots, with poster boards around the room. We all took what we felt were the most important things and voted. And it was fairly anonymous, unless you were watching people through the crowd, but it gave us another way to provide response and see what these community members felt were the most important items that we brainstormed in the previous meeting. Also, we started to have experience with our classroom response system, Turning Point, which the non-educators, one of these things where everyone gets in a little quicker and you start voting on stuff, numbers 1 through 4. So we'd put up questions and be able to provide anonymous feedback in case you weren't comfortable discussing things in open forum or even your small group. Also during this meeting, it became obvious that the group was very interested in facilities tours. That was something everyone was very anxious about and enthused about. And so the very next meeting, the first one, we met at Conneaut. And that was an eye-opening tour by Mr. Lang there, where we went through the building in pretty great detail, looked around everything, and I think there might be a video around that somewhere online if you haven't seen it. But learned a lot about a very truthful opinion of what at least the staff there thinks of the building. We got to see it all for ourselves. When we got to the meeting proper, we discussed a task force website that had been begun with basically a document repository for all the stuff we're looking at. And also went over some of those dot responses from the previous exercise to see what we came up with as our top 3 in the individual categories. And then I had our virtual tour for educational vision. This was just some photos and stuff to see what sort of things are happening in modern school architecture, what sort of things might be possible if we were to build new or renovate. Not slanted one way or the other, but just giving us some perspective on what a newer facility looks like as opposed to what we may have in our district currently. And then some just more general discussion as we move along. And then for the 4th meeting,
Can you hear me? I
My name is Joanne Maven. I've been a community member long enough to have my children go to Kenwood when it was still a brand new school. So I've had much experience with being a parent with my children in the system. And meeting number 4, we toured the Kenwood building. I'm supposed to switch one of these. It was an eye-opener, to say the least, because I had passed. So you got to introduce me to the technology. I had passed Kenwood for many years on my way here and there, and it looked beautiful from the outside. And I thought, well, that's the building my kids went to. But then we toured Kenwood, and I found out there are many more students going to the school now. It is 60 years older than it was. Not when my kids went to school there, but close. And it was an eye-opener. So we toured the building, and after the tour, we went back to review some of the things that we had discussed in meeting number 3. And I will say that at these meetings, there was much conversation and much back and forth. There were lots of different views, and I kept feeling like it was herding cats because there were so many different opinions. But we shared those opinions, and that was the most important thing, I think, for all the meetings. So in this meeting also, we reviewed the elementary options that the task force had generated from the first meeting. Then we went on to the next meeting. At our last meeting, people had commented that we really needed to get a peek at or to get more familiar with the educational overview that the city school board had formulated. And so we did that at that meeting. We assessed other ways of looking at the buildings. You know, were there ways that we could incorporate other educational methods in the buildings that we have now? And so that was what we did at 4, and then at 5 we continued that. We looked at elementary size, different configurations. At this meeting, we all had our little clickers, and so as a group, we could vote immediately and see what our options were, and the ones that were favored and were not favored, comparing the many options that we were given.
I had the privilege of going with the group to visit a couple of the new schools in Wichita. And the first impression I had was the pride and the happiness that our tour leaders were happy also to be the superintendents at Northwood and North Baltimore had what they had accomplished. Northview went through a long period like we did, assessing what had to be done, what must be done, what could not be avoided being done, and ended up with a lovely little building housed K through 12. They had done a marvelous job of planning and integrating. Nothing was fancy. They had worked closely with the teachers. It was interesting in seeing how everyone defines the need for more space, for more flexibility, for ways of handling different groups of students. The building that we visited, Northwood and North Baltimore Elementary and High School, answered these questions differently, which makes my point. There are many ways of solving a problem. there is no one answer. And that is probably one of the major messages that this particular commission has for the board members, is we found different solutions for the same kind of problems, as we define the best way for our population. I will say that in both instances, I think the powers that be loved their HVAC systems the most. They were so proud of all their big equipment behind doors. They threw the doors open, took us through, showed us this, showed us that, talked about how wonderful temperatures were here, wonderful temperatures were there, this was even, that was even. It was just so exciting. I mean, education was wonderful, but oh, it's so nice to be able to have the same temperature in every room, almost all the time, in every part of the building. That was, it was almost comical. It was interesting in seeing North Baltimore's renovation. They have, they're a small district. Their high school is brand new, and it's like a little boutique high school and middle school combined. And they do a lot with long distance learning because they are so small, they can only have so much staff, and it's a very intimate situation. In the elementary school, they had many, I would say, fortunate fires, because they had fires that came along and they were able to renovate the electrical system and bring things up to date. So they did keep their elementary school. They did extend it, and their original building was very good. Plus the fact they have been able to update important areas during the time. So everything did not have to be replaced in part. And again, they love their HVAC system. The next presenter is going to talk more about the various options that we looked at. And there is no clear-cut answer. There are a number of ways that the board can choose to go. I don't know that there's one that is the perfect answer. I know I have one that I prefer, that I think is the most efficient, which happens to be the consolidated. But there are other very good arguments to be made for other viewpoints. So I will turn it over to the next speaker.
That's a slide from the 6th meeting that Francis was talking about. I'm Wayne Colvin. I'm a member of the Facilities Task Force and the Financial Task Force. Appreciate the board allowing the citizens to get involved. Also think that we need to thank the facilities staff and custodial staff for maintaining the buildings as much as they do with what little we provide them. It was amazing to watch them work and what they've been able to pull together. At our 7th meeting, we talked about the high school and talked about the different options that have been discussed. We also observed earthquake principal theater shake the building when he jumped up and down on the 2nd floor. And after that tour, we talked and really thought that when we get into a master plan for the high school, we should look at renovating and partial demolition and additions to make things go. we did a round robin to anonymously vote what we thought the community, how they would vote. We were not asked to rank order the options based on construction costs, cost for operation and maintenance, or the cost of capital improvements to maintain the buildings over the next 20 or 30 or 50 years. So it was clearly just about, what do you think people are going to support? The updated budget figures of the 4 options that rose to the top out of all the many. Option 1 was a new consolidated elementary school. And that price tag, if you go out to the estimated cost for a 2019 start, was $39 million. To renovate all 3 elementary schools, $32 million. A new Pontiac, Kenwood, and a renovated Prim was $37 million. And a new elementary school, and then to renovate and put additions on Prim School was $34 million. These costs include soft costs or non-construction costs. What would be the cost to temporary house the students in larger classrooms while construction was going on, which actually is in option 2 and option 3, but not in option 1 or option 6A. The groups voted on what they thought people might vote for. Option 1, the consolidated school, when it was put up head-to-head, what we did was, okay, pick between option 1 and option 2, which one are you going to pick? Well, when option 1 was put up against the other 3 options in round-robin voting, it did not win in the sense of getting the most votes for that Halos option. Option 2, the rental of all 3, only won out against 1 option. Option 3, the 2 new buildings and a rental of Prim was thought to be the vote that the committee would support. And option 6A, which is the option for a new elementary school and a renovated Prim, and an addition on to Prim, was 2-1. That's our last slide.
You guys want to come up? So if the board would have any questions, you guys want to come up right now? We can field any questions from the board, and if you have a question of the architects, we can ask them. You guys might want to be on standby to walk up to the stage.
One question. When you mentioned option 6A, and was there any discussion, you say build 1 new elementary, was there a discussion of where that would be located?
One option was discussed to put it up on the main campus here. Plots from different people kind of gel together, and the plots would be a building that would handle half the population, 750 plus minus whatever seems appropriate. Maybe when it's built, to put it in a situation where the mechanical space is built large enough so it could support heating and cooling of a renovated high school, which would help with cost sharing there. You would do that, move the kids out of Prim, renovate Prim, put the additions on. Once that's finished, figure out how you're going to redistrict or what you're going to do between the two schools. And I thought one of the better things was that I think the school board should then donate the Conneaut site and the Kenwood site to the city for Parks and Rec space. And the Conneaut could end up with soccer fields or baseball fields or other things that aren't fully developed at the city park. And then Kenwood, because there's no playgrounds or anything in the south part of town, that could become playgrounds and soccer fields and other activities. So by doing 6A, we improve the quality of life throughout the community.
Was that discussed? Was that something you mentioned when you were talking about this?
It was discussed in small groups and different things. Those are pulled together from a whole bunch of different people. One of the things someone suggested that if the school board were to give Pontiac site to the city, they put a caveat in that if they needed another school at some point in the future, that site would come back for another school if that would be appropriate.
Through this process, do you guys feel that you received enough information to make the right decision for us?
We saw lots of things. I was shocked to see a teacher sitting in, for space to teach a kid or a student was a converted custodial closet, and the custodial sink was right next to her desk. That teachers were trying to teach kids on the stage of a gym while gym class is going on, because the schools are so overcrowded. There was talk about, well, we removed the carpeting so we don't have mold anymore in these classrooms, but the cause of the mold wasn't addressed because people weren't really sure where that came from. Walked into a classroom or a conference room in Kenwood, and the floor of the room was hot because the steam pipes were leaking so bad it was coming up through the floor and heating the space. Some people say, well, we should renovate. If you're going to renovate, you're going to take everything out of the building down to its bare bones, and then you're going to start over. And the construction cost is going to be probably cheaper to build new. And if you were to give the city so graciously those two schools, it would save $500,000 in the construction budget. And if you do it that way too, you won't have to.
Quite a lot of editorial.
If you renovate the schools and build new, you're talking about getting portable classrooms where basically every kid in the district will end up in portable classrooms for a minimum of a year, and some might end up to be in portable classrooms for 2 years while buildings are torn down and built back up. And it could take 6 to 8 years to accomplish that.
Do we have the cost, the previous slide?
Must have to go out to North Baltimore to get it. There it is.
So collectively as a group, are you maybe recommending option 3 as the best option for the school district, or are you recommending option 3 as what you feel the community will support the school district?
We were asked to vote on what
could you please use the mic?
If you look at it from a capital improvement process, you've got 3 buildings, you've got three roofs, 3 boilers, whatever, to replace every 20 years. You also have increased costs for maintenance and the other costs related to running the school. The other thing is you look at 6A, you got 7,000 less feet of building to maintain. So that's my personal view. It's not the committee's, because the committee was not asked to make those determinations.
Just a bit of possibly a counter perspective of that. I mean, the task was to figure out what was best for the community, define what the community could determine. You know, I think a lot of the community members, the task force members, were approaching it from that standpoint about what is our community going to support. I know a lot of people voted for things that they did not necessarily agree to on their personal level, but we're trying to determine what we could do within the community to actually get a levy passed and something built. As far as Wayne's points on efficiencies and whatnot, I mean, no, we were not asked about efficiency. We weren't asked about what scheme would be the best for our education for our students either. We were just trying to determine what are the options are we going to be able to bring forward and have passed and have something built or renovated in our community.
I have a question. I have a question.
He's got a question.
On option 3, the new Pontiac, new Kenwood, and renovate Crim, is it going to be possible to build the new Pontiac and Kenwood without destroying the existing buildings first? Can it be built side by side?
That is correct, and that is one of the reasons why you don't see option 4, 5, or 6 on here really, because Crim does not have the land around it to allow a footprint for a second school while the old school is still in service. But there is space at Conneaut and Kenwood to build a new one while we use the previous buildings during the school year and not have to have the added cost of swing space. So yes, there is room at Conneaut and Kenwood.
Thank you.
When you were discussing the renovation of Crim, you had included discussions on renovating the facility to accommodate the central administration office.
Yes.
So that's included in this.
Yes, yes, that's my understanding. Oh, no, they didn't.
There were many options on the table, but the actual 6A, no.
Point of clarification, option 3, we say renovate Crim. We are not saying expand Crim, correct? Additional square footage?
We are planning for additional square footage. That would be in order to get all 3 of those schools to have about a third of all the elementary school students, which I don't believe Crim would quite have, especially because I believe that plan involved having the preschool go back, right? So there would be more square footage.
I didn't hear the answer to the preschool. Did you say that it is included in the renovation of Crim or not?
One of the reasons why Crim would have more space added on during the renovation is because the preschool is there. So it would house the preschool and a third of the elementary school.
Thank you.
Okay, if there are no other questions, we'll go ahead and get the financial task force representatives up to the screen, and I'll have our technology director switch over to the new slideshow. Great. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And so we'll have our, as the people transition, the financial task force presentation.
Good evening. My name is Ben Otley, and as David said, one of two of us here representing the financial task force. I wanted to just kind of begin the remarks by again thanking the board for the opportunity to give the community a little bit better opportunity to be educated on the financing options that are available to schools, challenges with the Ohio Facilities Construction Commission, their process of determining where we rank in terms of wealth, and all of those things. It was quite an eye-opening experience. Certainly wanted to thank the board, most of which I know, and also thank Francis as well for the opportunity. In addition, I want to thank David and Fannie and Howie for their participation. You all wanted to know what we thought, and so this presentation is going to cover the consensus that we came up with in terms of the options that we looked at, and we'll go from there. We'll go to slide 2. All right. So our committee was comprised of about 40 members. The numbers varied a little bit from the very beginning to the end, but it was roughly 40 people who participated most of the time. There was a cross-section of the community involved, including some folks that were there as representatives, as citizens, but we did have people who are officials in various government entities, local business representatives, alumni, of course, of the schools, including myself, and parents, including myself. I have a 13-year-old here at the middle school and a 9-year-old at Conneaut Elementary alum myself, and grandparents and so on. So we had a pretty good cross-section of the community. Next slide. We had 9 total meetings, beginning in August, ending this month. Okay, the key factors that we looked at would be everything that you would expect, and I suspect all the things that you all studied the last time that we went to the ballot, including community income and home values, age, educational attainment of residents, rental property values in the district, poverty levels, types of taxpayers, tax rates, and use of the permanent improvement levy and other taxes. We spent much of one of our sessions talking about the permanent improvement levy that was on the books, and sort of setting the record straight a little bit on that. Agriculture, residential and business tax contributions to the district through property taxes and income taxes currently, and the affordability index of our district compared to other districts. So we kind of look at where the current tax burden is compared to what other districts are paying. So we studied all those things. In addition to that, a couple of conclusions that came out were, one of the questions that came up was why is Bowling Green City School District so low on the list for getting money from the state through the EIP or through the Ohio Facilities Construction Commission? And the answer to that is really multifaceted, as I think you all know. But for the benefit of the community, a couple of things. Number one, we are a university town. We do have BGSU sitting within our district. It's a very large piece of property that does not pay property taxes to the school district. that's one thing. Number two, with BGSU, we have a lot of rental properties in town. And most of those rental properties that go with BGSU students do not have students that come to our district. So we have all that value sitting there. And then we also have a very, very large geographic area within our district that has farmland. So we have a lot of value that's sitting there, and two of those sectors don't have a lot of students that go to our district. And the way the state looks at us is they look at us and they say the total value of property that you have in your district divided by the number of students that you have in your district, and that's how you rank on the state as far as if you're going to get money from the state, from the Ohio Facility Construction Commission. That's how that is determined. So we looked at that. One of the programs that's available through the Ohio Facility Construction Commission is known as the Expedited Local Partnership Program. Steve Roca from the Ohio Facilities Construction Commission came and spoke to our group. We had pretty much a whole session devoted to this. The conclusions that were drawn from this are, number one, that the district is eligible to apply for this program. Number two, it may provide, and I will emphasize the term may provide state funds in the future when Bowling Green becomes eligible. Currently, we are sitting in the 500 out of 600 some schools on the list for becoming eligible for state funding. The thought process is it will be at least 10 years before our district is actually eligible to get any money from this program. And so we looked at this program. What this program allows you to do is to apply for the funds, and what happens is when your district comes up as eligible for the funds, your district receives those funds at that time, provided that you follow the guidelines that have been laid out through the program. It does require the district to follow the guidelines of the Ohio Facilities Construction Commission if you want to be eligible for the money. But there's no downside to applying for it in terms of having, basically there's no downside to applying for it. You're not bound to anything necessarily, but what it does do for you is it will give you the ability to get those funds back from the state when we come up, if the funds are there. Okay, so there's a lot of ifs with this program. Right now, the formula has us, I think, David, it's 17, around 17%. So if we engaged in this program now, we would lock in a percentage, whatever that percentage is at that time, and we would be eligible to receive that percentage of our project back if our name comes up and we're eligible to receive the funds. So what you're going to find in the future slide is that this was really the overriding recommendation, the strongest recommendation of the group is that we recommend that the district apply for the ELPP program. 85% of the group said we want you to apply for this program. We also had a whole session devoted to tax options and ballot language. We had Becky Prinzhorn from Bricker came and spoke to us, and she is an expert on ballot language and the way the districts can go to the ballot and ask for money from their community. And then we also did look at the district's financial forecast and budget meetings. So the next thing we looked at is how can we go to the ballot? What are the different options that we can use? What are the different funding options and funding schools can use? The two things that we looked at are the fact that we can use bonds backed by property taxes, and also at least purchase certificate of participation if we used an income tax. So the options for funding those are a traditional income tax, an earned income tax, a property tax. Those are the ones we focused on. We also talked about sales tax, a countywide sales tax. However, a countywide sales tax, there's a lot of legwork that has to go into making that happen because it would be countywide. And all districts in the county would be affected by that, not just us. So we ended up looking at traditional and property tax. Our traditional income and property taxes are the two things we honed in on. We threw out earned income for a couple of reasons. There were a number of sectors within the taxpayer base that would not pay an earned income tax. And so we kind of threw that out as an unfair option. The next thing we looked at, you've seen this slide, are the four options that are out there. As you can see, they vary between, I'm sorry, Tracy, this was your slide. They vary between 34 million and 39 million. I'm going to turn the floor over to Tracy this time.
He was on a roll. I wasn't going to stop him. So as Ben just said, these were the four options that you've already seen. I'm Tracy Hovis. I'm a parent in the district, and I'm also an educator in a neighboring district. So I was part of the facilities and financial committee, and this was very enlightening. Not typically a numbers person, but now I am, thanks to David. So with the four options, we basically looked at all of them, and we chose 40 million, the project not to exceed 40 million, because even though the highest for 2019 is around 39.5, we wanted to recognize the timing of when this goes on the ballot, and the estimates may go up. So we made it a little higher. All right, so based on the estimated $40 million cost of a project, this is how the votes kind of broke down. It was 29-6 to go forward to the ballot with the $40 million. The type of bond issue, we decided that it was important to divide this, not just go for property tax, although there were 3 votes to back that, 5 to just do traditional income tax, and as Ben said, we threw out the earned income tax and nobody voted for it just because of the number or tax base would be smaller, and that would be an unfair tax to not reach into all of the pot. But what we did come to a consensus or a majority vote on was the combined property and traditional income tax with a 50-50 split. So 50% would be backed by a bond and 50% would be backed by the traditional income tax. You'll see that the option that says other, some people came up with creative splits, like 75-25, and so, but those were not enough to outweigh the 50-50 split. And just to, we looked at the term of it, and last time when we went to the ballot was 37 years, and one of the discussions that had taken place from community members was that was too long. And so I think, you know, within the committee, we looked at 30 years and seeing that this would save us around $7 million in interest by going to a 30-year as opposed to 37-year. And then, as Ben had talked about with the ELPP program, this was our overwhelming consensus. 30 feel that the board should really consider that we should enter into this process, knowing that it is not a guarantee, but that there's a possibility that when our number does come up, there could be monies toward either the high school or, you know, getting some of that money back. The next question was recommending how we would put it on the ballot. It got 3 votes to do separate, which without one, the other is kind of null and void. We need both of them. So doing the combined issue got 26 votes. Now I know you're probably looking at these numbers and like, oh, they don't all add up to the same. Well, some questions people voted more than one, and so we had to throw out those votes. And then number 6, when would you recommend placing this question on the ballot? And this is not necessarily split evenly, but you'll see some divide here in that majority wanted in November 2019, based on the fact that, you know, we've already had it on the ballot twice, and, you know, time is of the essence, especially with the condition of our buildings. So sooner would be better than later. March of 2020 got 7 votes, and November of 2020 got 4 votes. Also, it was brought to our attention that, you know, with the upcoming levies and the renewals that the district is dealing with, that you might need a little wiggle room in respect to this as well. So at this point, the recommendation of the Finance Committee is that we are proposing to the board that you do not exceed $40 million in a request from the community. You use a traditional voted property tax backed bond issue for 1/2 of the project cost, and use a traditional voted income tax backed financing for the other half of the project cost. So that would put $20 million on the bond issue for 30 years, which is approximately 1.76 mils, which would cost, if, you know, when we're speaking to voters using that rounded number of 100,000, $5 and $12 per month for that, and then $20 million by the traditional income tax. Once again, 30 years, an estimated 0.25%, which would be $13.79 per month for the average income of $66,215. What's important here too to note is that when we looked at the traditional income tax, we wanted to look at our tax base. And, you know, looking at the Social Security that the elderly receive in our community, that would not be taxed by this traditional income tax. So we would be, you know, potentially giving part of the savings to our senior citizen community members by not just basing it on property tax. Also, by doing the 0.25 traditional income, it will generate an excess of about $325,000 per year. Now, this money, the task force discussed that we would want it to be put into permanent improvement and not operational costs, so that it could be used for the future of these buildings and maintaining them for roofs, HVAC, boilers. So that's an important component of this recommendation, and that we had some, you know, strong discussions on, is that $325,000 that it would generate. Plus, it gives you some wiggle room, you know, if incomes go down, or, you know, you have some cushion. The ballot recommendation is for November of this year, $40 million 30-year bond issue combined with a 0.25% traditional income tax levy for capital and maintenance purposes only. So that is where that $325,000, that language at the bottom line, comes into play. That's the last slide.
So this, in anticipation, you're probably going to ask this question. This particular task force was not asked to vote based on saying, well, what will, we were asked to vote based on what we thought the best financing option was. We weren't necessarily asked to say, based on what the community would necessarily support or whatever. Based on, we looked at the numbers and we thought this was the best way to finance it. We didn't have that caveat, is all I'm saying to you. They didn't tell us that restriction when we voted.
I have a question. In that $40 million, what is included in the $40 million? Does it include architectural fees? I don't even know what would be involved. And I've asked this question, David, but I think it's important that the community know what is coming out of that $40 million and what the percentages tend to be in, I don't know, architectural fees and increasing rates of construction. Is that a you question?
Steve, do you want to address, because the question is more of that's more of a facilities question. What I understand, the first thing.
It is and it isn't. And, you look at the cost of all these buildings, and if for some reason we go with option one, it's so close to 40 million.
Well,
And when I first saw this, I thought, oh, what about the cost of architects or whatever? So I think it's important for the community to know what is involved.
Well, Steve, you want to come up and answer the question about the 30 million?
What if?
So the facility side of this, I'm sure Steve will tell you what's in here. From the financial committee's perspective, they wanted to make sure that you had enough money to choose whatever option you wanted to choose here without cutting you off. But Steve, you want to talk about what's in 39 million? Or?
Yeah. The two columns again here are representing a couple things. The 2018 column is predicated on the costs, basically the same costs that OFCC uses across the state. And basically they have 8 different regions in the state, and they quantify what the yearly costs are. So the 2018 column represents those current costs for a project that would be starting design in 2018. Those costs by OFCC for 2019 have not yet been issued. So the 2019 column represents an anticipated cost adjustment for inflation for a project that would start design in 2019. So again, with the cost models, you're looking at trying to predict, based on past history and future expectations, what will those costs be, because construction then would really be starting a year later than that. And again, that's the best information we have, which is the state information based on all their data that they collect. So that 2019 cost represents complete total project cost, that is hard costs, which is construction costs, and soft costs. Soft costs would include the cost of managing the project, designing the project, advertising the project, testing, any types of inspections. And typically, those soft costs are about 16% of the total. Roughly in that 14 to 16% of the total. So that 40 million is really the all-in cost of the complete project, construction, managing it, designing it, furnishing it, technology, everything.
Thank you.
Well, obviously, you guys have spent 7 months plus doing the research and the homework on financing, bonds, and funding, all that stuff. Is it something that you can educate friends and neighbors about the process?
I can say absolutely yes, from my standpoint.
And not being a numbers person before this, I feel like I am much more educated to be able to inform my neighbors about this and why we chose the solution that we did.
And we've asked for the support that you guys have given us. We appreciate that, both the facility task force and so on. one of the complaints we hear in the community all the time is our inability to get that information out and to educate the community. Is there a better way to do that other than how we proceed?
On these items specifically, or when we go to the ballot?
Any and all.
I don't know, I honestly don't know the answer to that question. What I do know is that this community needs to move forward. I know that. We need to move forward and take care of our schools. I think that's what our community wants to do, and I think we need to bring the right plan to the ballot, finance the right way, and if those things happen and we have a grassroots campaign from community members that participated in this process and others, if we can get the support of our community to do the right thing and support our schools, it'll pass.
And I feel too that having members from all sections be able to have a voice in this, that they, you know, nobody can say they didn't have their opinion heard, because, you know, we all listen to one another, and even though we didn't agree with it all the time, we came to some sort of consensus. And, you know, nobody got everything that they wanted. Nobody did. But I think that we can all take a little bit of this and say, you know, I own this. I helped make this, and I needed to help it make it come to fruition. So in terms of, you know, I don't know how to attack, you know, the voters in terms of getting the word out, but I think, you know, like he said, you have two groups of people that have invested time that should, you know, step up to help move this forward.
I for one, am wondering and questioning quite a bit. When we put the issues on the ballot twice and they failed, why? And I don't have the crystal ball or the statistics to say why. I haven't done any polling. And I'm not sure of a question, except that the statement is, it challenges us as a board as we go forward. I think the question was, or the statement was made, put the right issue on the ballot and you'll get support. And it failed miserably, especially the last time. And we thought it was the best laid plan. Okay, educationally, best laid plan. But the community said no, it's accepted. So, I think for me, at least, as we come to a vote sometime, what is that best laid plan? Is it the recommendation? Is it, and again, that's, I know it's a worry for me. I think you guys have done a great job through the whole process. And it sure seems like you're very inclusive. And you know this, it's not unanimous. And so how do we get that consensus? You mentioned consensus. How do we get that consensus group to come forward, whether they agree that they got what they wanted in terms of the report out or not? That's, I know, really, really important as we go forward.
I would say as far as the, you know, speaking from the finance perspective, because I wasn't involved in the facility side of this, but speaking from the finance perspective, I don't know how you get a better consensus from a group that we got in a group, to get that many people to agree and vote the same way on issues like the ELPP, like, yes, we should go to the ballot, like, yes. The community, I believe, wants to address this issue. And I think what will do the job for you is if you use us that were on the committee to get the word out when something does go to the ballot, because we are probably the most informed people on the issues. Use us, and we'll get the correct information out there. That's another thing that we will battle, is everybody thinks they know. And it seems that a lot of times everybody seems to believe. Research it. Make sure you have the correct information, And that is what I think, whatever committee comes up, levy committee, board, the correct information, and there was a concerted effort to do that the last time through website and through grassroots campaign, door to door, all those things. Those are the things that need to be done. But when misinformation is put out into the community, it has to be addressed, and the correct information has to be put out there. That's the only thing that I know.
Switching gears a little bit, knowing that the high school is still booming out there, renovation and possible new additions, did you have any discussion about how long the board and the community should wait to begin dealing with funding?
No.
No.
And the reason we didn't is because our job was simply to take the recommendation of the facilities task force and tell you how to finance it. That's what we were asking.
Okay, and any other questions for the financial task force presenters?
I asked the same question in the facilities group about the high school. Did you all have any discussion about when to start dealing with that? Francis?
We looked at it and kind of wept because it is in many ways so uncomfortable during much of the year, having to see even the rather modest efforts at Northwood. I want to read some more. We have to address it. I realize we also have to let us not forget the high school. It is worthy. It is so worthy. I know we can't do everything at once, but man, they need updating, and they need an environment that is not something to be overcome, but that helps. And the environment there now is one to be overcome.
Thank you.
Did have just one more comment. The one thing that did come up about a future high school project, we didn't specifically talk about how much that would cost, when to do that. We didn't, but what we did talk about is the fact that in the event we do become eligible to receive the 17% back from the ELPP program, those funds can be used to offset a high school project in the future if we've already done the right thing and funded our $40 million project. We funded it. After that, we can take those funds to offset the cost of a future high school project, which will make that more palatable on a ballot. So that is one thing we did. One other thing, and this is just me. This is not. We didn't talk about this in the task force specifically, but one thing that you might want to consider doing when looking at the 4 options at slide 7 of this presentation is a net present value analysis that would include, not just the cost of the project, but the cost of the operation, the cost of maintenance of those facilities. And if you do that math, probably will get you to which one of these is the right decision. That's just my opinion.
Okay, any other questions? Great, well, thank you very much for having us in this evening, and look forward to seeing you on Saturday. So we're finished with our presentations. Thank you very much.